Hello and welcome to my kitchen. Today I will be making some tomato juice. I will be using the water bath canning process to make the juice. Let's get started. So I will start with the first pound or so of tomatoes. I don't have to take the skins off ahead of time. The skins will come off when I run them through the sieve. And I simply start out by coring them. I cut out the stem end of the tomatoes as much as I can. These have got a pretty good stem on them, so cut that out. I'll also cut off the flower end just because these have got a pretty hefty flower spot on them there. Then cut the tomatoes up into roughly quarters. These are pretty big tomatoes, so I might cut the quarters in half as well for these. It will only take 2 or 3 tomatoes to have a pound of tomatoes going, so I'll get these cut. And of course you can use a cutting board for this if you like. This one has a little bit of marking around the top. I'll just cut out anything that doesn't look good on the skin as well. So I'll get that cut out. Make sure I've cored it well. Snip off the flower end. And cut that up into quarters. I think perhaps one more nice sized tomato should do the trick. I'm hoping to make about 4 pints of tomato juice today. If you've got any spots on the skin, just cut those out as well. And then what we would need to do next, once I get this one cut up, is get them on the stove and get this to boiling as quickly as possible. So I will put this on the stove, and then I'm going to mash them up a little bit, and then I'm going to keep throwing, cutting up and throwing tomatoes in, trying to keep the boiling process going while I'm adding tomatoes to the mix. Now I have moved my camera a little bit, as you can see. I wanted you to be able to see in this pot. I'm crushing those tomatoes down a little bit, and as I add more tomatoes to the pot, I'll just crush those down as well. So now I'm just getting more tomatoes and doing the same thing. So I'm coring them, adding one piece at a time. Now during this process I want to keep this on the boil, so I'll add these slowly. I'll add a piece and crush it in just a little, just gently crush it there to soften it up. The main goal of this part of the process is softening of the tomatoes. So I'll do these, as I said, a little at a time. So bear with me here a moment while I get working on these. So there doesn't have to be any finesse about the way you cut the tomatoes up. Just cut them up however you can most easily manage that, and keep adding them to the pot. Try to keep that boiling during the process. Doesn't have to be a rapid boil, but we do want to keep it boiling. So I have all my tomatoes in the pot. I have it's simmering away here. I just want to show you a couple of other little tips. I have some leftover tomatoes from last night's supper that I'm just going to add those as well. That way nothing goes to waste. And I have a bowl of cherry tomatoes. Now your cherry tomatoes can go in there as well, and they don't need to be cut up. Just make sure you take the stem, any stems off the end, and you can throw those into the pot as well. But my cherry tomatoes are doing extra well this year, so I have them coming in faster than I can eat them right now. So I'll go ahead and throw some of these in here so that we don't have any of them going bad before we have a chance to use them. I might throw about half of these in here. Keep the rest for another day. So I've just pushed those down in there as well. Get those crushed. And then this will need to simmer for 5 minutes. So I'll just get those cherry tomatoes crushed just a little. I can hear them crunching under my masher. And then we'll look at timing for about 5 minutes while this simmers. Now that, one of the good things about canning, it takes a little time, but there's a lot of time in between where maybe something is simmering or during the processing, and you can use that time to be doing other things. So a couple more of these cherry tomatoes need to be crushed. They're wanting to get away from me. They're slipping out from under the masher. Can't say that I blame them for that. I probably wouldn't want to be mashed either. So, good thing. So we'll let that simmer. Get in there. And while that's simmering, that gives me an opportunity to clean up all those cuttings that I put in the sink, the stems and the anything else that I cut off the tomatoes. So I can get those cleaned out. This looks like it is off the simmer just a little. Turn her up just a bit. Crush it a bit more. Hope you can see that. I'm not sure how well you can see that, but it is working away nicely. That'll get those tomatoes all nicely softened up so that I can run them through the food mill and get all the seeds and the peels off them. So the way I juice my tomatoes is I run them through the food mill to get all the skins and the seeds out, and then I run it through a strainer. Now a lot of people that have juicers will just skip a lot of the work and use their juicer. If you have a food processor, you could run it through the food processor and then strain it once you've done that. But I kind of like the hands-on approach of using the food mill, and it's relaxing in a way. It's kind of odd, I guess, that sometimes just doing a little extra step gives you time for the mind to do its thing, to wander and contemplate things and work through some of the issues you might have going on. There's just so much going on right now that it's nice to be able to let your mind go and be free and keep busy. Well, I had some technical difficulties there. I ran out of battery in my camera, so I switched up cameras and hopefully this will work. And we'll just hope that I haven't cut my head off, because I can't see on this camera what I'm recording. So we'll just keep on soldiering on and see what happens. So here's my food mill. Just have to put it together. And I'll be placing the food, the tomatoes in here, and then I'll turn the mill and all the tomato juice will come out the bottom, and the pulp, most of the pulp will actually run through the mill out the bottom, and we will have just the skins and the seeds left in the top. So let's see how this goes. Grab another pot. I'll move my pot of tomatoes over here to the counter near the sink. And I will get a scoop. I've been a little bit put off by my camera dying on me like that, so we'll just do the best we can, and hopefully it won't be too choppy when you're listening to this later on. So we'll throw a few spoonfuls of tomatoes and juice into the food mill, and then just simply turn the mill. So as I turn the mill, it will push the juice and tomato pulp through the holes. I'm using a medium sized grid for this. To show you that my food mill has 3 different sizes. It has a strainer with big holes, a medium sized one, and then one with small holes. Because I'm going to strain this after I'm done running it through the mill, I'm using the medium size because that will just be a little bit quicker. The smaller size could get clogged up fairly quickly. So as I'm running things through and it's begin to empty, throw another few spoonfuls of juice and pulp into the mill. And it's such an easy process. I get to look out my window and think about things and talk to my friends. So this will take a few minutes. Since I am having trouble with the camera, I'm going to go ahead and pause the camera for a little bit and then go ahead and get the rest of this done. And when I'm nearly finished, I will turn the camera back on again. So I have run everything through the food mill. Now I'm going to strain the juice. I'm going to take the original pot that I was cooking the tomatoes in, put them down here in my sink with a stainless steel strainer. And then I'm simply going to pour this juice through the strainer, which is pretty simple. Yes. It's a nice big strainer, so it'll hold a lot of juice before it runs over. My spoon, stir it down. Add the last few drops. And just carefully strain that all through. That'll take just a couple of minutes. There's nothing difficult about any of this, so I hope you'll give it a try. So we have the juice that has been strained into the cooking pot, and now we're ready to put it back on the stove. Hi there, so we're back. This is very close to being ready to start putting in the jars. My extra hot water did go off the boil, so I have that turned back up. And this is just about ready. So while that's taking another minute or so there, I'll get my first jars ready. So I'll get my jar lifter out and very carefully get these out because they do have hot water in them. Pour out the hot water that's in the jar. Put it on a towel. I think I should be able to do 2 of these at a time. Now, because these are tomatoes, they do need some additional acid content to be able to can safely. So these pint jars need a tablespoon of lemon juice. You can also use citric acid. So I'll use 1 jar of 1 tablespoon of lemon juice for each pint jar. If I was using quarts, I would use 2 tablespoons. Now, salt is optional for the tomato juice, but since I usually don't can with salt, but I will add just a little. The recommendation for a pint is a ½ teaspoon, but I want this to be a little bit lower salt, so I'm only going to use a ¼ teaspoon for each jar. And I'm going to use canning salt. It'll give a much better result. So 1/4 teaspoon in each jar. And then I'll start filling the jar. Now I need a ½ teaspoon of headspace in each jar. So you'll remember from a previous show that this is our headspace measuring tool, and an inch is 2 lines in, so it's going to take us into the mouth of the jar. So I'll just move these a little closer because I can make such a mess. So try and limit the mess as much as I can, and start getting juice into the jars. So it doesn't matter what jar you use. You can use a wide mouth jar or a regular mouth jar. See, I told you I'd make a mess. It's just not been a good afternoon here in the Stout House. So they seem to be making all kinds of technical issues. I'll move these a little bit closer. Trying to have that out where you can see it, and all I'm doing is making more of a mess. But it looks pretty good. I think we'll be very satisfied with the end result here. So bring that up into the mouth of the jar. This one looks like it needs a little more. Then I will check my headspace. So here I have, it is so close, and that's just a tiny bit over. So we will just swap that out a bit. There, that's perfect. And so is that. So now if you remember, we take a wet cloth or a wet damp paper towel to wipe the lip of the rim of the jar, and along the side is where the lid is going to fasten onto the jar, so that there's no food residue that will interfere with the sealing action of the lid to the jar. So I have the lids in some warm water over here. I'll put one on each jar. Yep, we'll try that again. Towel to hold the hot jar while I tighten that up a bit. Now you'll hear some say finger tight. I've been using the term hand tight. These lids don't need to be tight. They just need to be just comfortably snug. So we put this jar in the pot. With the rack is in the bottom of the pot. So you don't want to forget the rack. And get the next two jars out. So here we go. Getting down towards the bottom of the pot. So I'll tip that up. And try and do that without knocking over my funnel. And I've dropped my spoon about 3 times already and had to wash it so I could keep going. I guess some days are like that, aren't they? We just have things that just don't quite go right. But as long as it turns out in the end, it'll be fine. So check our headspace. That looks pretty cool. We might just take a smidgen out of this one. And my paper towel just went on the floor, so we'll grab another one. Well, you know, I hope that this video will come together, and if not, then I'll have to make some more tomato juice, which would probably happen before the end of the season anyway. Have a good crop of tomatoes. I've been very fortunate this year. So, but I did want to do other things besides juice. So we'll get our lids on and our rings. You might also hear these lids often referred to as flats. So if you hear somebody that's canning talk about flats, that's what they're talking about, the flat part of the 2-piece lid. Tightened up just a little, and that is ready to go in the pot. And we have probably about 1 inch covering those. I don't think we're going to get any more water in there, so I'll just keep my pot of hot water for when this, if this should start to boil down during the processing, I can add some more boiling water and keep that water above the level of the top of the jars at all times. So get my towel off the burners here. I have turned the pot up. It has to come to a nice rolling boil, and then once it's boiling I'll set the timer for 35 minutes and then just check on it now and then until the 35 minutes is up. So let's see if we're, because I did make an awful mess, didn't I? Oh, it sounds like it's getting very close. It sounded like it was boiling, but it was just fooling me. So now our pot is boiling. Boiling rather vigorously. I'll turn that down just a little. I've set my timer. It's set for 35 minutes, down to 34 now. I have the kettle on for extra water. Should I need to top the canning pot up a little. I have a little juice left over for immediate consumption, and a little bit of a mess to clean up. I have things to put away here. I have my pulp from the tomato juicing process, a few other things to clean up. So I'll be back in about 35 minutes once that processing time is complete. My timer is now completed. 35 minutes has elapsed, and the water is still boiling, so it continued at the boil the whole 35 minutes. I didn't need to add any more water, so those jars are processed now and can come out. So I'll very carefully lift them out with the jar lifter. I don't know if you can see this, sort of in keeping with how everything's been running for me today. There's a little bit of a white film on the top of that jar, and particularly on the lid, but on the side of the jars as well. And that is because I forgot to add a little vinegar to the water. I was having a few challenges today, but that's not a problem. That can be cleaned off simply with a lot of hot water and vinegar once those jars are cooled down enough to handle. I'll pull them out of the jars, put them on the trivet, and hopefully we'll have some nice tomato juice here in about 12 to 24 hours that can be safely stored. Now, you can already hear that popping. As the jars cool down over the next 12 hours or so, you will occasionally hear a pop. That's the lids doing their thing, the jars are sealing up, and that sounds actually a good thing. I want to show you something. Now, I had some challenges with this batch, as you know, so it's possible that the tomato juice might separate a little bit. Ideally, the second heating of the tomatoes should help prevent the tomato juice from separating. But you'll see I have a jar here. This is a jar that I did in 2019, so it definitely should be getting used. But you'll see that the tomato has separated into an almost clear liquid and more tomato solids in the bottom. To make that good to use, you just give it a shake to reconstitute it, just as you would if you bought a can of juice in the store and it says shake before opening. Give that a shake, and that looks really good and ready to get used up. That will get moved to the front of the cupboard so that it gets used up quickly. So I hope you enjoyed this this video. It was a little bit unusual. It's jumped around a little bit. Hopefully you saw enough to be able to follow along. And I can always do some similar products here again in the near future, so that you might see something that runs a little bit more smoothly. So thank you for being with me today. Please like and follow my videos. I'd love to see you come back. And until next time, have a great day.